Det är ju obeskrivligt och alla är ju fruktansvärt oroliga och nu hamnar man i ett utmattningsstadium här på något vis.
Lisa Holm was 17 years old. She lived in Skövde, a quiet Swedish town where routines are predictable and distances are short. She was known as reliable, polite, someone who showed up on time and followed through. In the summer of 2015, she worked seasonal shifts at a small cafe in Bloomberg, a rural area surrounded by farmland, workshops, and narrow roads that empty quickly in the evening. Sunday, June 7th, 2015, was supposed to be ordinary. Lisa reported to work earlier that day, completing her cafe shift without incident. Customers came and went, conversations were brief. Nothing about the day suggested it would end differently than dozens before it. As the evening approached, staff began closing routines, wiping counters, checking inventory, preparing to lock up. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent a text message to her father. She wrote that she was finished with her shift and heading home on her moped. It was a small message, routine, the kind parents receive without thinking twice. Her father expected her to arrive in Skövde later that evening, just as she always did. She never did. When Lisa failed to return home, concern grew steadily. This was not like her. She did not change plans without notice. She did not disappear without explanation. As hours passed, her father decided not to wait any longer. He drove to the cafe in Bloomberg himself. What he found immediately raised alarm. Lisa's moped was parked outside the cafe, exactly where she would normally leave it. The keys were still in the ignition. Her helmet was gone. The cafe owner joined him, and together they searched the building and surrounding area. Storage rooms, nearby paths, the immediate grounds. Lisa was nowhere. At 9:47 p.m., police were contacted, and Lisa Holm was officially reported missing. Officers arrived shortly afterward and began a preliminary search. Dogs were deployed. Nearby outbuildings and a multi-room shed were checked. Nothing was found that night. No sign of struggle, no indication of where Lisa had gone. At that stage, the situation remained ambiguous, but one detail stood out immediately. Lisa had not left voluntarily. Her transportation was still there. Her personal routine had been interrupted mid-motion. Whatever happened occurred quickly, within minutes of her finishing work. Police secured the area and expanded the search radius. The case transitioned from concern to urgency. Rural locations provide cover. Darkness comes fast, and time, already slipping away, was now critical. By the end of the night, one thing was clear. Lisa Holm had vanished between closing her shift and starting her journey home. And someone else had been there. Lisa Holm did not show up the following morning. The search continued, but with every passing hour, the urgency only intensified. Police began a meticulous examination of the cafe and surrounding areas, inspecting every corner, building, and path Lisa might have taken. Tracking dogs followed scents, but there were almost no traces of the girl. The situation became more complicated with the appearance of odd details. During a search of a nearby barn, a volunteer team discovered a single glove. At first, it seemed insignificant, perhaps someone had left it there earlier, but experienced investigators knew, in missing persons cases, small details rarely occur by chance. Lisa's parents and close friends began recalling details that had seemed trivial before. They described her plans for the evening, how she always removed her jacket before riding her moped, the helmet she always wore. Every tiny fact became part of the bigger picture the investigators were trying to assemble. On the second day after her disappearance, June 8th, the search area expanded. Volunteers from the Swedish organization Missing People, known for their methodical work in locating missing individuals, joined the effort. They combed the entire district, including nearby private properties. There they found Lisa's personal belongings, her phone case, receipts, tickets, and keys. The following day, June 9th, a pair of Lisa's earrings was discovered in the barn. Her moped driver's license and house keys were also found within this area. It was now clear either Lisa had left these items deliberately or someone had placed them there after the fact. The incident began to take on the characteristics of a crime. Investigators started considering that Lisa might be in danger from the moment she vanished. All these elements were forming a grim mosaic: scattered belongings, a missing girl, and no indication that she had left voluntarily. On the third day of the search, June 10th, the barn and surrounding areas were thoroughly inspected again. Missing People volunteers noticed something unusual. 2 individuals arrived claiming they had already searched the area. This raised suspicion. Police revisited the site and, in addition to personal belongings, found Lisa's jacket and helmet. Finally, on Friday, June 12th, Lisa's body was found in one of the nearby barns. She had been strangled. The location and condition of the body indicated a brutal but planned murder. There were no signs of a struggle. It was clear Lisa had been lured from the cafe or otherwise trapped, and her death occurred in a controlled environment. Investigators established several key points. 1. The motive was sexual in nature. 2. The perpetrator deliberately hid the body, attempting to mislead the search. 3. DNA of the suspect was found on Lisa's clothing and on the rope used to strangle her. 4. The suspect had no alibi on the day of her disappearance. The discovery of Lisa's body marked a turning point. What had started as a missing persons case became a fully fledged criminal investigation. Every step, every small detail was now part of a larger, meticulously planned picture. Lisa Holm, a 17-year-old girl who had simply wanted to finish her shift, had become the center of one of Sweden's most widely followed criminal cases. Her death forced investigators to work even more methodically, uncovering all the details and motives of the perpetrator. This case would be studied for years, and its lessons would remain. By mid-June 2015, the search had ended, but the work had not. Lisa Holm had been found, yet the truth behind her death was still unfolding. Investigators now moved away from the fields and barns and into analysis rooms, evidence labs, and hours of silent review. This phase was slower, quieter, and far more decisive. Every detail from Lisa's final shift was replayed: the closing of the cafe, the empty space where her moped had been left, the short window of time in which she vanished. There was no sign of panic, no broken objects, no witnesses reporting screams. That absence spoke loudly. Whatever happened to Lisa had begun calmly, with conversation, familiarity, or trust. Attention turned to the area surrounding the cafe and nearby properties. One location stood out: a workshop in Martorp, close enough to walk, isolated enough to avoid attention. Investigators had searched it before. Now they returned with a different focus. Inside, forensic specialists found what the initial searches had missed. DNA recovered from a rope and from several of Lisa's personal items pointed to one individual, not a local resident, not a passerby, but a man who worked nearby and had been present in the area during the search itself. Neregis Bilavicius, 35 years old, a factory worker, quiet, largely invisible, until he wasn't. Investigators reviewed his movements during the days following Lisa's disappearance. He had remained unusually close to the search zone. He had spoken with volunteers. He had shown interest in how the search was progressing and where it was headed. At the time, it looked like concern. In retrospect, it looked like monitoring. Digital records confirmed what behavior suggested. His phone activity aligned with critical moments in the timeline. There were no unexplained gaps, no credible explanation for his presence near key locations, and no alibi that held under scrutiny. Forensic analysis established that Lisa had been killed by strangulation. The method was controlled. There was no indication of chaos or resistance. This was not a crime born from impulse. It was contained, deliberate, and executed in a place chosen for privacy. Investigators began to understand the sequence. Lisa had not run. She had not fought in public. She had been intercepted and isolated. By the end of this phase, the investigation had shifted irreversibly. There was no longer a mystery about whether this was a targeted act. The evidence told a different story. Someone had waited, someone had acted, and someone believed he could disappear back into the background. He was wrong. By late June 2015, the investigation had firmly established Nerijus Bilovičius as the prime suspect in Lisa Holm's murder. With the evidence meticulously collected, DNA, personal items, mobile phone records, and witness statements, prosecutors prepared to present a case that would leave little room for doubt. The courtroom was tense. Families, journalists, and the public filled the seats, all waiting for answers about the young girl from Hjo who had vanished so suddenly. Prosecutors began methodically, outlining the timeline: Lisa leaving her workplace, the moment she was intercepted, her movements traced through digital data, and finally the grim discovery of her body in the remote workshop. The defense attempted to challenge the prosecution's evidence, questioning the reliability of timestamps, the interpretation of forensic data, and even suggesting alternative scenarios. Could someone else have been involved? Could some evidence have been contaminated? But the prosecution had anticipated these defenses, presenting cross-verified timelines and multiple independent confirmations that left no significant gaps. Behavioral experts also testified, explaining Bilovičius's psychological profile. They detailed signs of predatory behavior, meticulous planning and control, emphasizing how his actions were deliberate rather than impulsive. His manipulations during the investigation, attempting to redirect volunteers and interfere with searches, further demonstrated calculated intent. Witnesses were called, including colleagues from Lisa's workplace and members of the Missing People volunteer organization, whose discovery of her personal items was pivotal in confirming the suspect's pattern of concealment. Each testimony added weight, painting a clear picture of the methodical and premeditated nature of the crime. After weeks of careful examination of evidence and cross-examinations, the jury deliberated. By mid-2015, the verdict was announced. Nerijus Bilovičius was found guilty of murder. The evidence had proven beyond reasonable doubt that his actions were intentional, planned, and executed with cruel precision. The court emphasized the gravity of the crime. A 17-year-old girl taken in broad daylight, murdered by someone she had no reason to fear in a premeditated act driven by obsession and control. Bilovičius received a life sentence, and the trial underscored the importance of detailed investigative work, cross-verified evidence, and careful observation of both physical and behavioral clues. Justice, though delayed by the complexities of the case, had been served. The case would remain a chilling example of calculated predation, demonstrating the lengths investigators must go to ensure accountability and the protection of vulnerable individuals. The verdict was delivered. The court had spoken. But the world outside did not pause. There was no sense of triumph, only exhaustion. Legally, the case had concluded, but its ripples extended far beyond the courtroom. Lisa Holm had become more than a victim. She had become a symbol. Across Sweden, her story sparked reflection. Conversations about public safety, workplace vulnerability, and the uncomfortable truth began. Violence does not always emerge from shadows. Sometimes it hides in the ordinary. Cafes, parking lots, workshops, places that once felt safe now carried unease. After the trial, media coverage continued, but the focus had shifted. This was no longer a mystery to solve. It was a lesson in responsibility, in noticing the warning signs that went unseen. Workplace inspections increased. Questions arose about security measures, oversight, and how easily isolated spaces can become traps. The system had not created the crime, but it had failed to prevent it. For Lisa's family, the consequences were deeply personal. They withdrew from public attention, choosing silence over scrutiny. No verdict could return what was lost. Justice could be defined in law, but grief cannot. At the cafe where Lisa had finished her last shift, memorials appeared, flowers, candles, notes from strangers. For a time, people lingered quietly, standing where a young life had abruptly ended. Eventually, the crowds dispersed, but the memory remained. Years later, Lisa Holm's case continued to be referenced in discussions of criminal behavior, victim protection, and public awareness, not just for its brutality, but for how swiftly an ordinary day can turn into tragedy. One conversation, one decision, one moment from which there is no return. The man responsible remained behind bars, removed from society. Yet imprisonment offered little comfort. Punishment does not undo loss. Only lessons endure. Danger does not always announce itself. Control can be invisible. Violence often disguises itself as normality, and the line between safety and tragedy is thinner than it seems. Lisa Holm's story did not end with a verdict. It ended with a warning. Thank you to everyone who watched the video all the way to the end. Our team put a lot of effort into creating it. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. It's a huge motivation for us to work even harder and release new videos faster.